Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to cover the process of finishing the edges of leather. So let's head across the workbench and get started. Okay, so I've prepared a sample piece of leather which has a nice perfect edge and some curved edges to demonstrate the different finishing techniques. So ideally what we want is a nice flat surface on the edge of the leather, which is not always possible depending on how many layers of leather there are, etc. But this is the target. We want a nice flat surface. So once we have that, we need to prepare this for burnishing, which we'll cover in the next episode. A few tools you can make yourself which are very useful for this. This is a sanding stick. This is basically a piece of wood, not very thick, with different grits of paper glued to it. This one, for example, has two sides with grit 60, a 120 and a 180. So it's a nice flat surface for doing straight edges of leather like this. So to prepare this for burnishing, pardon me, we're going to basically choose a 120 grit and press that against the edge, nice flat edge of the leather, and give it a gentle sand. So all we're doing is we're leveling out that edge and making sure it's as flat as we can get it, taking off any high spots. Different leathers can be hairy, other leathers can be quite flat, but for a nice straight edge like this, this is the sort of tool you want to use. So that gives us a nice straight flat edge which will burnish very nicely. If there are shapes, cutouts, circles, obviously a flat edge wouldn't be appropriate to get into those, so we just make a simple round. This is a dowel. It has a 120 grit sandpaper glued to it. These last amazingly long time, so you can make a few of these different grits. For example, there's another one which is a 180, and these are ideal for getting inside tight corners like this. For example, there's a small burr there. This would be ideal for sanding off that burr before we prepare it for burnishing. So again, just like the straight edge, we want to try and get a nice flat surface in any of these concave cutouts, which you will have a lot of in leather for belts and buckles and straps and all sorts of things. You'll have odd shapes like this which you need to prepare for burnishing. So make yourself some nice sanding sticks, some flat ones and some round ones, different size dowels, or you can find a pen, a pencil. Just take some sandpaper, wrap it around a pencil for example, and you've got a nice round sanding tool which will do the same job. Again, if you don't want to mess around making bits of wood, you can use a ruler. Just wrap your ruler in wrap the paper around your ruler, and you've got a nice flat surface there you can use to sand edges and so on. So once we have the edges nice and flat, the next step is to what's called bevel the edges. Now we use a tool called an edge finishing tool or an edge beveler, and these come in different sizes. Depending on the manufacturer, they'll use different numbering systems, but these, for example, this is a number 1, it's stamped in there number 1, and this is a number 2, which generally means the gap is 1 mil or 2 mils. So the smaller size will take off less material than the slightly larger size. There are other sizes in the range, but these are the two I use most frequently. So to use an edge beveler, all we basically do, we have a nice straight edge, we press the little groove onto the corner of the edge and then just press gently and slide it forward, and you'll see what happens. A little piece of material is being cut out which forms a very slight mitre on the edge there. Now the idea is to try and get not quite a dome, but to take off those two sharp edges, so on the grain side and on the flesh side. So we'll turn it over and we'll do the same on that side. What that's given us is a rounded off edge. So when we come to burnish it, these edges will fold over and will smooth out much more easily than a square edge would, which would just mushroom out if we didn't take off these corners. So we take off the corners first with the edge beveler, and that makes the burnishing process simpler and much better job. So again, if you have curved areas, you can use the tool just the same. It just takes a little bit of practice. So do your straight edge first, and then just come in and follow the shape of the curve with your tool, just turning your leather and the tool as you follow the line, and there you have the same nicely edged curved section. So we'll do that circle just to finish off. Just follow around, curve. If you miss a bit, you can just go over it, it's not a problem. Like I say, if you want to use a number 2 tool, it's exactly the same process, just takes off a slightly bigger chunk of leather. So you can see this piece, it creates a thicker offcut and a much thicker chamfer along the edge of the leather there. So once we've got these edges edged with the edging tool, just go over again with sandpaper, just very lightly, just to take off any little ridges that may be there. Like so. And then your piece of leather is then ready to be burnished, which we'll cover in the next episode. So before we leave this topic, I want to show you a couple of examples of tricky situations you will come across. Now, often we glue pieces of leather together to stitch them and to form joints, etc. So it's not often you have to bevel a single piece of leather. Usually we glue 2 bits of leather together. So here's 2 bits of leather glued together. I purposely made 2 mistakes with this. On one side you can see where the leather has been squashed together. Pardon me. Where the leather's been squashed together, the glue has oozed out. Now if you try to sand and burnish that, it'll just make a right mess. So we have to prepare the surface by first of all removing the glue. Now with contact adhesive, which you use a lot in leather work, you can generally just rub it off with your finger, and you can see that it forms a bit of a globule, but that can be a bit wearing on your finger sometimes. So I use a little what's called a glue eraser. It's just basically a hard chunk of rough textured rubber which behaves like your finger. So you rub off the glue with that, and you can see that's coming off nicely. So if you don't remove that glue, you will not get a decent polished surface when you come to burnish. So best if you can put it on a hard surface, and then you can take off the glue like so. And then once you've got the bulk of it out the way, then you can sand it and edge it as before. Now on the other side of this sample piece, I've purposely cut it so that there's an overlap. The edges of the leather don't meet. This is quite common when you're joining 2 pieces of leather together. You get this small lip. So again, if you try to sand that, it'll take you forever to get this level with this. And if you try to burnish it, it just would look awful. So the first thing I should do is to trim this overlap with a knife to remove that and to bring this surface flush with this surface. So we'll do that first. So there you can see we've now got 2 flush surfaces. If any glue is left on there, just remove it And again, that surface is now ready to be sanded and dressed, ready for the burnishing process. So 2 common problems: glue spilling out, remove the glue before you carry on, and misaligned edges. So trim the edges so they're flush, then sand them, and we're ready for the burnishing process, which we'll do next. So that covers the basic preparation of the edge. So in the next episode we'll cover the polishing of the edge, which makes the edge really smooth, makes the grain of the leather lie flat, and really finishes off the project. So we'll do that next. So don't forget, please click the like button and press the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to press the bell icon, which will notify you of the next video release. So until then, thanks for watching.